When people first learn about the Finger Lakes, they usually learn it as one of the most premier wine regions in the country. But there's a part of this region's history that doesn't get enough attention. And it's that the Finger Lakes wine country was actually built on the backs of the Indigenous nations that are part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So this is going to be a multi-part series on how the Haudenosaunee literally spent centuries engineering one of the most agriculturally rich landscapes in the Northeast, and how that land was taken from them, leaving the very foundation of what the Finger Lakes wine country was built on. But to tell you the story properly, we have to start from the very beginning, which is how the Finger Lakes actually formed. So during the last ice age, about 21,000 years ago, the Northeast, the entire Northeast, was covered by these massive glaciers. And as these glaciers receded back towards Canada, they carved these deep, narrow valleys from north to south across the landscape. And then about 10,000 years later, those glaciers began to melt. And as they melted, they left behind sediment that acted as natural dams, which trapped the meltwater inside those valleys, giving rise to these 11 lakes, which we now call the Finger Lakes. But here's what makes these lakes so special. So first, the lakes are pretty deep, but specifically the largest lakes like Seneca and Cayuga actually descend hundreds of feet below the surface. And these two lakes would eventually support the highest concentration of vineyards and wineries in present day. See, the depth of these lakes give the water an extraordinary quality. It's slow to heat up and slow to cool down, which means it keeps the surrounding area cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter, acting as a natural temperature buffer for anything that's growing around it. And that feature alone makes the Finger Lakes one of the most hospitable agricultural regions in the Northeast, because it's capable of sustaining the types of crops that communities depend on to survive and thrive, especially in the winter. But the first people to discover this weren't European settlers or winemakers. The first people to figure this out were the Haudenosaunee. But the formation of the lakes is just the beginning. The true story lies with the Indigenous people who actually figured out what to do with them.